Military laser weapons are real and getting realer. Hi, this is Ftrhstry. We're in a time vortex from the 2120s. I'm Kingdangerously. We're here together remembering the next 100 years. In 2022, it's a good time to put a pin in the military laser field because interesting stuff is happening and you're kind of getting near a tipping point on laser weapons. We're going to look at 3 stories in succeedingly larger scales of power. And we're going to start with the US Navy. In 2014, the US Navy deployed a system with about 30 kilowatts of power on one of their boats to blow up little drone things and other bobbing objects on the water. In early 2022, April 2022, they tested a system that many have reported as 60 kilowatts. The US Navy is staying mum on that exact number, and they blew up a drone successfully. US Navy says they have no plans to deploy this laser weapon. They're just keeping around because it looks neat. They're not keeping it around because it looks neat. They're keeping it around to blow things up. That's what they do. And, you know, in many cases, to good, harmonious effect for the world. We're not going to weigh in on military morality at the moment. We're just going to talk about the tech. Over in Israel, good time to have opted out of morality, we suppose. They're testing a system they call Iron Beam, which deploys significantly more power at 150 kilowatts. And this system can stop mortars, it can stop rockets, and it can stop unmanned aerial vehicles. They've tested it by successfully blowing all those things up in the air. So they're on the way to forward deploying that weapon. Then moving to the most powerful laser weapon currently in the 2022 zone in development, the United States Army is developing a laser system built on glass slabs to powerfully combine energy that would double that Israeli power up to 300 kilowatts. 300 kilowatts is enough to do some serious damage, obviously. Drones, missiles, possibly even tanks, certainly people. You can do stuff with 300 kilowatts. It's pretty powerful. Now, all of these laser systems have the distinct advantage of being vastly cheaper than standard edition ordnance. Like in, say, the Israeli case, it can cost up to $100,000 per missile thing that you're shooting up at another missile that you want to blow up. So when you get down to only a few bucks a shot for a laser, you've got a serious, massive cost improvement, obviously. So there's a major incentive for these organizations to develop this much cheaper, much more targetable weaponry. Next up, we can talk about the extent to which this will develop. You can expect reasonably that in the 30s, you're going to be looking at a 10x improvement, because back in 2014, you were looking at 30 kilowatts at the outside edge for the Navy's weapon. And here in 2022, or the 20s, or whenever you're watching this, as of 2022, they had reached 10x that with the US Army's 300 kilowatts, right? So it's reasonable to track that out and think in the 2030s, you're going to be looking in the thousands of kilowatts, or, what you would, AKA the megawatt range. So those lasers are so powerful that they'll be, in some cases, more visible than some of these kilowatts. The lasers that we're talking about here, while effective, are not visible to the naked eye. They just blow things up, but you have to look at them in special lighting and with effects on to see them at all. So in the 30s, you're looking at megawatt power lasers, and then you can imagine it just cranks on up from there later in the century and into some very powerful lasers indeed. If you're curious what the most powerful laser in the world in the 2020s is, I'm sure you can guess. It's in Romania, and it's about 10 petawatts. It's called the Magurel laser in Romania. My girl laser's shooting 10 petawatts. That's a lot of watts. It's about 1 trillion times as powerful as these kilowatt jobs. And there's also a petawatt laser named Zeus in Michigan. He clocks in at about 3 petawatts, but those guys are doing science. These high energy levels are, for short bursts of intensive research on stuff like particle physics. However, the fact that they exist means that it's going to be possible in the not too distant future for militaries to harness that kind of power. And it's the kind of thing they're going to do once they've established that these laser weapons are quite effective, which they will do because the Navy's not keeping it around because it looks cool. The one other thing to ping here is that the US Army is working on a project to defend itself from swarms of attackers, because that's sort of like the logical next thing to worry about. If you can shoot down one drone, well, then maybe your enemy wants to just send 5 drones and see if you can shoot all those. Or I'm sure you've seen the drone Olympics ceremonies. They could send hundreds and hundreds of drones, and drone swarms do indeed become a large part of military conflict in the middle of the century. I think 2030s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Kind of scary. So you need more than just targeted individual laser beams going pew, pew, pew. You need like full blasty things. And the US Army in the early 2020s is still working on a system they call Thor. It's an acronym. You can look it up. The Army sites are delightful. And it basically sends out microwaves to disable large numbers of incoming drones. So, directed energy weapons are a thing. They're getting more powerful. We'll circle back around to look at them more as they get more powerful. But the things you should expect to see are 1,000-time increase in the power, moving from kilowatts in the 20s to megawatts in the 30s, and then eventually to gigawatt, terawatt, and petawatt lasers. And what that can do on the upper end of power is really kind of like insanely cool. Stuff like defending Earth from asteroids, or zapping UFOs, or, you know, decimating a space colony, or a floating habitat that you don't like. So lasers are a bit of a dangerous weapon. The more saturated the world gets with power, like raw energy, and the easier it is to control and focus that power, the more dangerous this stuff becomes, obviously. In the 2020s, it's still early days, but you're starting to get into some real military applications. And by the end of the decade, you're going to see these things widely deployed, largely as a defensive measure against incoming fire. All right, let's have that conversation about military morality now. Just weigh in the comments and tell us how great or not great you think military activity is. Is there a value to peaceful action? I'm going to say probably yes. Maybe let's discuss. Whatever you think about it, the tech is here and it's worth scratching a noodle about. Laser beam to the future. See you soon. Bye.